official doors closing time across Iowa. These are both live pictures of caucuses, and Donald Trump is taking the microphone inside the GOP caucus.
Everything I hear. We don't win anymore as a country. We used to win. We don't win with the military. We don't win at the border. We don't win in any way. Obamacare is going to be repealed and replaced. Everything that we're doing has been wrong. We've made so many bad decisions. You look at the Iran deal that we just made. We're giving away $150 billion. We get nothing. We owe $19 trillion. The budget that we just approved, that got approved in literally hours, is worth $2 trillion. It funds everything that all of us in this room don't want to see it fund. We're going to strengthen our borders. We're going to build the wall. Mexico's going to pay for the wall. I'm the only one that says that, but believe me, they're going to pay for the wall. We are going to bring our country back. When I started this journey, and it really has been a journey, an amazing journey. It's on the cover of Time magazine this week. People are talking about all of us. It's not just me. They're talking about, I'm a messenger. They're talking about us, what's happening. We're going to take our country back. We're going to run it the way it's supposed to be run, as a great, great country. We're not going to make the mistakes. We're not going to, remember this, I am not given anything from all of the special interests. I'm funding my own campaign. It's called self-funding. I'm doing my own. So I'm not going to be told by Ford or by anybody else what to do. I'm doing the right thing for you. I don't need their money. I don't want their money. I built a great, great company, one of the great companies, some of the greatest assets in the world. And I say that not in a braggadocious way. I say it because that's the kind of thinking our country needs. We're in trouble, but we're going to turn it around. We're going to make America great again. And thank you all very much. I love you. Thank you.
Again, because these are not legal affairs, these are party gatherings. There are no restrictions on who can speak. As you just saw, Donald Trump has gotten up in the all-purpose room of a Catholic church to speak to a GOP caucus. It is striking, listening to the argument. Ronald Reagan talked about a shining city on a hill. FDR talked about a New Deal for America. Quote, everything we are doing is wrong. It's striking.
Title of his book is Crippled America.
It's striking.
And he said that he sent the cover back on his book because he looked too nice and he wanted to have a picture where he was scowling more and looked meaner. It is an approach that is very unusual, very unorthodox, very unexpected, and it is working in this campaign. You saw the reception that he got in the room there. But it'll be interesting to see whether or not it carries the day in Iowa right now. And so much of that is numbers. Bernie Sanders and Donald Trump are very different men, very different candidacies. Both of them are counting on people who have never caucused before in order to close the deal tonight in Iowa. We've actually got some entrance poll data in terms of what's happening with first-time caucus goers, how many of them have actually made it out tonight. They always tell pollsters they're going to. Did they actually show up? Is that going to be determinative tonight? Steve Kornacki has the latest data on that for us.
Yeah, and as we keep emphasizing, these are numbers that are really kind of changing by the minute as we get a bigger sample size here. But the latest I can tell you on the Democratic side is this issue of, are you a first-time caucus goer? We always talk about how key these folks would be to Bernie Sanders in particular. The latest number there is 44%. Now, again, this is moving around a little bit. It was down a few points a little while ago. It seems to be edging up. We'll see where it ends up. But to put that in context, 44% first-time caucus goers on the Democratic side. The last time they had Democratic caucuses, Obama versus Clinton in 2008, that number was 57%. That was the huge turnout that race got out there. We could also tell you in 2004, that was John Kerry and Howard Dean and John Edwards. The number was over 50% then, first-time caucus goers. So here we are, under 50 right now, and again, that could change, but right now looking at 44 may not be quite as high as Bernie Sanders was looking for. We can also tell you this, 17 to 29-year-olds, this is the youngest group they look at, and we saw in the polling leading up to this a gigantic age gap on the Democratic side. I can't emphasize that enough. When you were looking at young voters, the margin was overwhelming. Sanders over Clinton. Older voters, the margin was equally overwhelming. Clinton over Sanders. So 17 to 29-year-olds, wanted to pay close attention to that. We're seeing right now 17% of the Democratic electorate being in that youngest group. By comparison, in 2008, when Barack Obama also had a big victory with that same group, the number was 23%. So Barack Obama got it up to nearly a quarter of the electorate. Right now, again, tentative, we keep putting that asterisk on there. Right now, it sits below that at 17.
Steve Kornacki, thanks. To Des Moines we go. Chris Hayes is with a Bernie Sanders campaign official there. Chris?
So, Brian, we are at this site in Des Moines here. The people online are still waiting to get into that auditorium back there. They're expecting around 250 people. There's 500 people packing the auditorium. Still all these folks to get in. In fact, Ryan here is a volunteer for the Bernie Sanders campaign. And what happened?
Well, we ran out of new registration forms, and I had to run and find some more literally in the middle of this. So these people who were lined up were all stuck in line because we ran out of the forms. And this is also the form for new voters and for party switches.
So one of the great things about the Iowa caucus is that you can show up having not registered and just register tonight when you walk in the door. Those forms allow people to do that, and they ran out of them. This site has seen a lot of very heavy turnout. I was just listening to what Steve's entrance polling was revealing about the proportion of new voters. Here at this particular site, it has been a very, very big night for turnout and apparently a big night for new voters.
All right, Chris Hayes, thank you for that from Des Moines. Nicole Wallace is with us, a self-described establishment Republican. Her words this evening.
Maybe the last time you see me alive.
Okay.
We'll wrap you in bubble wrap and get you home safe. Don't
I'm
worry.
warned by people I don't even know to stay off
Her
Twitter
name in the Witness Protection Program will be Bill. The question, I'm hearing from some folks watching the expression, take back our country. This is the second or third cycle we've heard it. Trump is the latest candidate to use it. Where's the country been? Who has it? Who are we taking it back from? What does it mean?
So I know the analysis is that he's tapped into, and I don't totally disagree with it, this feeling that we're in immediate and urgent need of turning around dramatic, historic decline. But I think that you can't divorce it from the promise to completely reverse that decline, because they don't just his supporters aren't just drawn to him because he addresses their sentiment about how far we've fallen. He promises to bring them back to a place they long for. And I think it's unfair to his supporters. He's the politician. I think we should be as harsh as we can be on his comments, because they cross every line I've ever known of in terms of political decorum and civility and acceptable, sort of attacks on your opponents and the inhabitant of the White House. But what his supporters are drawn to is the other half of the message. He gets them by saying, I feel the same way you do about what's happened to our country, but it's the promise to make us great and to save us from further decline that has brought what we believe to be large numbers out to the
And other people have tried to capitalize. I mean, that's the businessman's, that's the outsider's promise, right? No politician,
turnaround artist, right?
Politician can do what needs to be done. It has to be a non-politician, whether it's Carly Fiorina or it's Ross Perot or it's Donald Trump. You hear that message from outsider candidates.
But that's absolutely right. But I don't know how you can divorce take the country back from a promise to kick out 11 million undocumented migrants, who most of whom are Latino, a promise to bar Muslims from entering the country. There's a there's an element, there's a revanchist element in what he's promising and in whom he's speaking to.
I'm just trying to translate it. I'm just saying what his supporters hear is not just that I will ban Muslims, it's that, and I will keep you safe. And it's not just I'll build an awesome, huge wall. It's that I will stop the incompetence of two political parties who have tried to fix immigration and haven't. So it's his supporters. I just want to defend his supporters, not Trump. His supporters are responding to the promise to fix everything that's wrong with our politics in not a dissimilar way from what Sanders promises in terms of corruption.
In a best-case scenario.
I have to explain what our viewers are seeing. This is, again, too early to call. Note the percentage figure in the upper left. 1% of the results in. Given that, we're looking at Cruz, Trump, Rubio. Those of you watching in full screen HD will see on the far right of your screen the rest of the menu. That becomes much more important later on tonight when this becomes a bona fide running order. But again, 1% of the results in. And these are ridiculously small numbers because it is ridiculously early in what could be a very long night. Here's the Democrats. A whopping 4% in. Our terminology, obviously, officially too early to call, showing Hillary Clinton 52-47, but again in a 4% gain. Our coverage continues. We'll take a break. We'll be right back. We are back. Sporadic returns, caveats all over the place. This is how we put it at 8 o'clock Eastern time based on very early entrance polls. Trump, Cruz, and Rubio appear to be in the top three. 1% of the raw number in. You see very, very small raw number returns beneath each candidate. This is the early running order in the Republican Party. Three-way at the top in the Democratic race. Again, early indications based on very early entrance polls, those people entering tonight's caucuses, there is an indication of a Clinton lead. We're talking about differing counting systems between the parties, but you see there 8% of the raw in 53-46. Rachel.
We're going to go now to Tad Devine, who's a senior advisor for the Bernie Sanders campaign. Tad joins us by phone from Des Moines. Tad, thanks very much for being with us tonight. Congratulations thus far.
Yeah, thank you, Rachel. Good to be with you.
I know that this is a question you can't answer, but I'm going to ask you anyway because I'm curious as to how you will not answer it. But how important is it for you guys to win tonight?
Well, listen, in many ways, I feel we've already won. You know, we started off about 50 points behind here. We built a great campaign. Bernie got his message out. I see in the entrance polls that income inequality is, one of the top choices of issues, along with jobs and the economy. So I think we're connecting with voters. I mean, listen, this is going to be a long process. We're here to win delegates. We'll split the delegates tonight with Hillary. We think it's going to be very close. That's all the reports we're getting. We're getting multiple reports of running out of voter registration forms all around the state, and that's a good sign for us.
We have been getting those reports as well, both on the Democratic side and the Republican side. Because you guys did mount such a big operation in Iowa, because you did, as you said there, you came from 50-plus points behind to tonight, it being too early to call and it looking like a very, very close race. Do you feel like there are things that the Sanders campaign learned in Iowa that you didn't know before this started that have changed the way you're going to approach the rest of this race? You've got enough money to be in this race for a very long time.
Right. Yeah, I don't think it's going to change the way we approach the race. I mean, we believe that Bernie's message is the most powerful message. You know, this economy of this nation is rigged. It sends too much wealth to the top. It's held in place by corrupt systems, campaign finance. He's talked about that not only from the beginning of this campaign, but for many years now. And we think if we deliver that message all across America, it's going to resonate like it resonated here in Iowa.
In terms of the relationship between the two front-running Democratic candidates, obviously things have become more combative as time has gone on. The contrasts that each campaign is drawing about the other candidate have grown sharper. There's nothing wrong with that. That's how electoral politics works. Whether Bernie ends up being the nominee or Hillary ends up being the nominee, are you getting close to a point where it might be hard to reconcile the two sides? I speak as somebody who monitors this as news, but also just somebody who pays attention to the conversation on social media. And I feel like it's gotten pretty harsh in tone between Sanders supporters and Clinton supporters. Will you be able to come together when it's time to get a nominee?
I think so, Rachel. You know, I've worked for Bernie Sanders for 20 years. He's never run a negative ad, you know, an ad that puts an opponent in there, attacks the opponent, you know, all the terrible stuff you see in so many places in politics. He has a lot of respect for Hillary Clinton. You know, he's known her for 25 years. So, and while they disagree on some very important and big issues, those issues deserve to be debated. In the end, he understands, and I believe the Clinton campaign people understand as well, that we need to have a Democratic president, and we can't afford to have any of these Republicans in the White House.
Tad Devine, senior advisor for Bernie Sanders campaign, joining us from Des Moines. Again, Tad, enjoy this night. I know this is going to be one of the busier nights of your life, but I do hope you enjoy it. Thank you for being with us tonight.
Thank you, Rachel.
Let's slip back in this caucus we showed there briefly to see if we can listen in. A ridiculous number of media, almost 1-to-1 ratio with caucus goers.
Everybody gets their own camera.
Really, everyone is either being interviewed or on standby to be interviewed. It's absolutely incredible.
Caucus.
I think the shouting is all over, and it looks like they have made their choices clear and gone home. Chris Matthews across town in Des Moines. Chris?
You know, Brian, when you were watching that guy run around that track upstairs in that gym, I was thinking that not everybody's interested in politics. When the Allied armies came into Paris in 1944, there were people sunbathing along the Seine. They hadn't caught up with the news. Anyway, let me bring in Steve Schmidt here. Steve, let's talk tough politics for a minute. Your party gets Bernie Sanders in the crosshairs. You get him as the Democratic nominee. What kind of a campaign would he face from the Republican side?
Look, Bernie Sanders is a 74-year-old socialist from Vermont who believes the top marginal tax rate should be 80%. He is far, far outside of the mainstream of American politics. He's extraordinarily far to the left of President Obama. We had a debate in this country about paying your fair share being defined as raising these top rates to 39.6%. So Bernie Sanders, from a economic vision for the country, is not something that is sellable in the mainstream. And Democrats, should he be the nominee, will be shellacked in the general election.
How many states would Bernie win, as you see it, giving us that rhetoric, if you use it, your party?
I think Bernie Sanders wins a handful of states. You know, maybe Vermont, California, Oregon, Washington State, but not too many.
He gets the left coast, but not the East Coast.
Yeah, I don't think he gets the East Coast.
He doesn't get Ohio or Pennsylvania?
He doesn't get Ohio, Pennsylvania. I'm not sure he gets New York or New Jersey.
Wow. Well, let's talk about your party and the meteor that might hit it tonight, which is a one-man band, a man without a faction. He's not a part of a Tea Party movement, nor is he part of an evangelical world. He is a man who's not part of the establishment. If he wins tonight, will the Republican establishment come to grips with him and say, damn it, we got to live with this guy?
Look, if he wins tonight, it's very difficult to see the scenario where he loses. What state does Donald Trump lose next? He wins tonight. He has a commanding lead in the state of New Hampshire. He's a commanding lead in Nevada. He's a commanding lead in South Carolina, setting himself up very well to the winner-take-all states that come Super Tuesday and after. And so I think the Republican leaders look at the potential of a Cruz nomination. And they look at Ted Cruz, and they see somebody who gets 140 electoral votes and leads to a loss of the Senate, potentially a loss of the House. So they look at Donald Trump and they see someone who has the potential to expand the pool to be able to pick off big parts of the Democratic coalition.
So, in other words, the rational thinking in the Republican Party is Trump's a better bet, and you're praying for Bernie.
Look, people look at Donald Trump, they say Donald Trump's a deal maker. Donald Trump's saying what's necessary to win the nomination, but somebody who was pro-choice, pro-gay marriage, New York values, wins the state of Iowa. The notion that he could flip in that direction but lacks the political dexterity to flip back, to be accommodationist, to be pragmatic, I think is hugely underestimated by people who think he can't do that.
I get your thinking. Thank you. Back to Brian and Rachel.
All right, Chris, thank you. And all the while, we are aware people are watching the changing numbers either full screen or at the bottom of the screen. Very, very early. We don't advise buying or selling any stock based on this. But again, the number to look at, just under 30 delegates there, is the percentage of returns in. 3% in. The finishing order has gone back and forth here. But these are very squishy, very early numbers. We have to scoot to a break. Our live coverage continues on the other side. We are back, and there's a distinction in our wording that many of you will note. We have gone from too early to call to an official call here of too close to call. On the Democratic race with 17% in, and on the Republican boards, which will show the top 3 Republicans, too close to call. Ted Cruz, Donald Trump, separated with only 5% in, mind you, by 115. Reminder, the Republicans do a raw vote. These are the top 3 with 5% in the GOP caucus. And again, we repeat these warnings. This is going to be back and forth all night. Negligible numbers in so far. We're joined here in the studio by Nicole Wallace, establishment Republican, and Lawrence O'Donnell, Boston Democrat. Nicole, what are you hearing? You're on your device a lot.
It's gossip, and like with all you real reporters around, I feel so insecure about trafficking and gossip, but I will anyway. So I'm here. Yeah. So I'm hearing that Rubio is having a strong night based on the crowds, based on things happening in the room, and I feel like in a lot of ways we haven't paid as much attention. You know, the two tarantulas in the bowl were Cruz and Trump, and Rubio took the high road, and it wasn't a strategy admired in this climate. A lot of people thought he was laying back too much, but if he has a, you know, and he's probably going to come in third, but people will think it's really awesome if it's a close third. So to me, that's very interesting.
And Lawrence, we heard quite a bit about the Rubio 3-2-1 strategy. Third in Iowa, second in New Hampshire, or so they hope. And it's completed by winning South Carolina. There is Rubio leaving the caucus tonight in Urbandale, Iowa.
Thank you, sir. Great night.
That's where our luck ran out. We have to take a quick break because when we rejoin, you'll be at the top of the next hour. We'll have freshened, updated numbers. Be right back. This is the counting of Republican ballots. It's going on live, and let's listen in.
Marco Rubio. Rand Paul. Chris Christie. Donald Trump. Marco Rubio. Jeb Bush. Ted Cruz. Donald Trump. Ted Cruz. Ted Cruz. Marco Rubio. Donald Trump. Marco Rubio. Rand Paul. Donald Trump. Rand Paul. Donald Trump. Marco Rubio. Jeb Bush. Donald Trump. John Kasich. Donald Trump. Rand Paul. Marco Rubio. Donald Trump. Marco Rubio. Marco Rubio. Rand Paul. Marco Rubio. Marco Rubio. Marco Rubio. Marco Rubio. Governor Christie. Jeb Bush. Marco Rubio. Rand Paul. Marco Rubio. Marco Rubio. Marco Rubio. Rubio. Marco Rubio. Donald Trump. Chris Christie. Where do you go? There. Rand Paul. Rubio.
We hesitate to jump in here like golf announcers, but let's state the obvious. Something as basic and organic as folded pieces of paper in an old plastic U.S. mail container while everyone who's ever owned a device is watching and recording for themselves, being tallied up on another piece of paper. It's from here and these modest routes, when we say first in the nation caucus, that the voters in Iowa, those who cared enough to go out and caucus tonight, can send a message that is heard, not just around the political world in this country, but around the world. To wit, let's look at where we stand, given the fact that this is very early on tonight. This is the Republican side. Again, pay attention to the percentage of the vote in. And as you saw, the Republicans do one person, one vote. It's raw vote. And having said that, with 5% reporting, it's a Cruz, Trump, Rubio race. Those are the top three in a crowded Republican field. To the Democrats. And again, our terminology is important. We've gone from too early to call to too close to call, and that's for a reason. Coming up on a quarter of what is kind of the distilled Democratic process in 52-47, Hillary Clinton, Bernie Sanders. Rachel.
I should be clear, when you're looking at those little numbers below the pictures of Bernie Sanders and Hillary Clinton there, those are not vote equivalents.
Of course not.
They're not votes in the same way that they do actually represent votes in the Republican side. The Democrats count differently. What we're watching here is a Republican caucus, and they're tallying up these paper ballots that were cast by every participant at this particular Republican caucus site in Des Moines. On the Democratic side, you don't count folded pieces of paper, you count heads. You count human beings that moved themselves to a specific part of the room.
In herds.
In herds, yes, to indicate who they supported, and then what that's reported out of that caucus is state delegate equivalent, which is something that is too boring to understand at this point in the race. We won't need to understand it unless we get really, really, really arcane in the closeness of this race. Steve Kornacki, looking at this particular caucus site in Des Moines, obviously we're just getting an anecdotal snapshot of how the race is going, vote by vote here. How important is this, and actually, what do we know about this caucus site specifically?
Yeah, actually, something very interesting. You are looking right now at that vote counting. That is the test. That is the key to whether this is going to be a good night or not for Marco Rubio, because Marco Rubio concentrated his efforts in this campaign heavily on the Des Moines area. Polk County, that is the biggest county in the state. That is where Des Moines is. That's where the state capital is. Polk County, and also right to the west of Polk County, that is Dallas County. That is suburban. A lot of college-educated, white-collar Republicans there, bedroom communities outside Des Moines, and a little bit to one county north of Des Moines. Those three counties, 3 out of the 99 in Iowa, are going to account for about 1/4 of the vote cast tonight on the Republican side. They were the heart of Mitt Romney's campaign in 2012 when he basically tied Mitt Romney, and Rubio has taken some heat from Republicans in the state for concentrating so much in that area. So he needs, I was paying close attention there to hearing his name called out, because he needs big numbers out of that area. And one other thing on the subject of Rubio, we've been talking about these entrance polls. One thing I want to draw your attention to, with all of the warnings that these are early numbers that are still coming in, this is what we're seeing. We talk so much about the evangelical vote on the Republican side, and so much of the commentary heading into tonight was, would Ted Cruz drive up a big number there? We also wondered, would Donald Trump make inroads? Well, Ted Cruz, right now in the entrance poll, is leading with evangelicals, and Donald Trump has made, at least according to the numbers right now, inroads. But Marco Rubio right now, getting more than 20% in this entrance poll of the evangelical vote. And again, evangelicals right now making up well over half of the electorate. And you remember, in the closing weeks of this campaign, Marco Rubio put an ad on the air in Iowa where he talked explicitly and personally about his Christian faith. And so that number, at least right now in the entrance polls, will be very good for Marco Rubio.
Steve Kornacki at the board, thanks. We want to go to Hallie Jackson, is at Cruz campaign headquarters, but has some reporting to add on the plot lines surrounding Marco Rubio tonight. Hallie?
I can tell you, Brian, that the campaign, the Rubio campaign, is feeling like they are going to have a really, really good night. And that is based on the turnout that they're seeing in some of the precincts that are important to them. What are those precincts? Typically more suburban areas, areas where you might see some of those more establishment Republicans turn out for somebody like a Marco Rubio. Although, as Steve is pointing out in those entrance poll results, that percentage of evangelical votes could be really important as well. So very optimistic from the Rubio campaign. He's been talking a lot more about his faith very openly on the campaign trail, especially in the last couple of weeks here in Iowa as he's made stop after stop here. At this point, the Rubio team feeling good, feeling confident. We've been talking that they might sneak into position that outperformed where their polling had been, so we're waiting to see what will happen with that.
We just need to repeat as we take another glance at the numbers. This is raw vote, 14%, not even a quarter in yet. First wave so-called entrance polls in a caucus state are the political equivalent of the fog of war. They are often very, very misleading, and it's good to just wait till we have more raw data in, though I must say, Nicole Wallace, this matches kind of what the talk you were getting from out there, that perhaps one of our plot lines was that Marco Rubio was going to have a good night.
Yeah, it also, you know, the Cruz was way ahead 2 weeks ago, and the fact that Trump has closed in on him and tops him in some statewide polls. In the Des Moines Register, which is a very respected poll, they're not wrong very often. He's just ahead of him. And that Marco Rubio is eating away at his evangelical support is a daunting sign at this point in the night. Cruz may very well eke it out, but he was a dominant figure in the Iowa caucus projections and polling 2-3 weeks ago, and the fact that they are right on his heels says something very interesting about this Republican electorate.
Thinking about the trend line in Iowa, it was interesting. After Donald Trump announced that he was running, he shot to the top of polls across the country, including in Iowa. He held that lead until October, when Ben Carson took it from him. Right. Ben Carson collapsed in November. Then Ted Cruz took that lead from him in Iowa. And Ted Cruz has been on the downswing in the polls. His momentum has been negative since then. The question is whether that created an opening for Marco Rubio. Let's go to Jacob Soboroff, who's in at the University of Iowa at that caucus site there at a place. He's in a Democratic caucus. So they are not counting folded pieces of paper. They are at this point counting heads. Right, Jacob?
So that's what's happening, Rachel. If this is not completely unexpected, it's very, I would say, incredible to see. So this is the Hillary Clinton preference group that's come over here. We ran out of, at this location, the cards to count people as they come in. So they've asked people to go into their preference groups, and they're counting them up both to get a head count and to get the preference groups. Now, check this out. I know you guys have our big bird's eye view as well. Yeah. This is the Hillary Clinton group. They've already gone over to the undecided group to try to recruit voters from the undecided group. But when you swing around here, Bernie Sanders, maybe three times as large as the Hillary Clinton group. Again, this group, they're counting them all at the same time because they literally ran out of cards. So what they're doing, if you follow me over here, the gentleman in the light blue shirt, his name is Nicholas Johnson. Believe it or not, between 1963 and 1973, this guy was an FCC commissioner appointed by President Johnson. Was a dissenting voice on the commission, and right now he is the precinct captain here for Bernie Sanders, counting each and every one of these votes so they get a head count on what's going on here.
Jacob, I'd like us to go back to that aerial shot here, just so I can narrate from the aerial view what Jacob was just describing. In the lower right-hand corner there, that small group of people that looks like they might possibly be a minion, that's the uncommitted voters, right? Then on the upper right-hand corner.
That's right. Yeah, no, we're going to walk, Rachel. We'll walk over there with you. So this is the uncommitted, as you said.
Very exciting.
Here's the uncommitted voters. Hey, Rachel. This is the uncommitted voters over here. When are you guys gonna make up your mind?
So what's gonna happen is they're gonna take the polls, and after that, the different the Clinton campaign and the Sanders campaign are gonna come over.
I saw Clinton guys are already trying to pitch you. They doing a good job?
Sanders,
All right. So Rachel, you heard it from the undecided voters. They're both getting it from both angles so far.
Okay. The larger group of people that we were seeing is the group of Bernie Sanders support. That's on the left side of our screen. On the upper right-hand corner, that's the Hillary Clinton group. This is democracy in action, as I feel like I could draw on it with a magnet and make a little face.
Hang on here, we have a development.
We have some enthusiasm on the Bernie side.
And Jacob, we should probably point out how this is unrepresentative of the state. Remind folks where you are and what type of gathering this skews toward.
That's exactly right, Brian. I want to remind people what we've talked about before. We are in Johnson County, Iowa, a liberal bastion here on the eastern part of the state. We're at the University of Iowa in the field house here. These are all students from the campus. And as somebody told me earlier, just to reiterate, I know I told you guys this before, whether 50 people or 500 people showed up here tonight, the candidates are leaving with the same amount of delegates. It doesn't matter how loud they chant, how many people are here. 6 precinct-level delegates, and the county as a whole has 91 state delegate equivalents out of 1,400. So again, the county has 1,400. The county has 91 and 1,400 as a whole overall. Tiny percentage. Guys, hey, Jacob from MSNBC, you're here in the Hillary group. Bernie's got a much bigger crowd. How are you guys feeling right now?
You know, I think we're going to be able to pull through, and we're going to have a viable group, and we're going to get some delegates to the next level.
That's okay. So that's a good point, Rachel and Brian. What she's just said is viability. There is actually perhaps a concern that the Hillary Clinton group at this location is not going to be viable, that they may not have, once the head count is done, 15% of the overall crowd. In order to leave here with any delegates at all, you need to have, as the animation that I showed you guys earlier tonight said, at least 15% head count for your candidate. So if there is not 15% of the overall group in the Hillary section, these guys may actually have to realign as well, either to undecided to be pitched by Bernie or Martin O'Malley. And by the way, in all fairness, we should show the Martin O'Malley group too.
Please.
Come this way. These guys in the corner over here, as the seas part, are the Martin O'Malley group. So they're certainly not viable yet, and they're going to get pitched as well on coming to join either Hillary or Bernie. But I don't know.
Jacob,
looking again at the hit.
I can't see them. They're invisible. Who are the Martin O'Malley people?
They're not visible in the high shot.
They're not visible in the high shot. Can you get
Rachel.
it from your camera? I know, I feel terrible.
Okay, here we go. Here we go. Okay, so here's the Martin O'Malley supporters. I just want to make sure that we got enough cable to get you guys all the way there. Come over here, guys, if you could. I'm actually moving the Martin O'Malley preference group live on television. Guys, you are here for Martin O'Malley. You don't look viable yet. What are you guys going to do?
Honestly, we're looking at the undecided vote right over there. I think they're really key in the political party system, so we'll see what they have to say.
And who are you thinking about realigning to right now? Hi, what's your name?
Shayma.
Who are you going to realign to?
Probably Bernie Sanders.
Bernie Sanders. How about yourself?
Sanders.
Bernie.
I mean, I'm holding out for O'Malley, so...
You're holding out. All right. Looks like a heavy lift. You're going to be here for a while, right?
Yeah.
All right. Okay. You heard it from that gentleman. He's going to hold out till O'Malley is viable.
One of them's wearing a cape, so maybe that gives him strength. He's wearing the flag of Iowa
State flag as a cape.
It is the Iowa Caucus, after all.
Beautifully done.
So again, to folks just joining us, while you're watching Democracy in Action, if you fly west out near the Nebraska border and you look at a smaller but similar Democratic caucus tonight, the totals are not going to look the same way. And in a college town, on a college campus, that's what we're seeing. Let's listen into the GOP tally.
Yeah. Here we go, 21.
Is there anything hanging on that? Well, there was a tear on that one, so.
No Santorum or Huckabee, right?
No, we did not have any other counts.
Huckabee or Santorum.
So we have no counts for the other candidates.
We had a blank one.
So, and one blank. So get out the calculator. You want to verify these with your calculator. And then get our total.
36, I think. 37.
So if we heard correctly there, no Huckabee, no Santorum, but again, it's a snapshot of this district in Des Moines, where, as we heard, Marco Rubio played it hard, and where you're going to get a skewing of the population there.
Interesting, of course, there with Mike Huckabee and Rick Santorum being the last two winners of the Iowa caucuses.
That's right. And he's showing off on that orange paper, perhaps not the best angle for us, is the final tally from that precinct. Kevin Tibbles back at his polling place, his caucus location in Indianola, Iowa. Kevin?
Well, Brian, as you mentioned, democracy in action, it has taken place here. Quite an incredible evening, really, because this place holds some 400 people, and it was standing room only. Many saying that this is the first time they've actually attended one of these things. A lot of men and women joking, saying that it was their spousal unit who dragged them out here tonight because they thought that this was a very important evening
Bush
to take part in.
Votes.
There seems to...
Ben Carson got 7. Chris Christie got 11. Ted Cruz got 10. Carly Fiorina got 1. Jim Gilmore did not receive any. Mike Huckabee did not receive any. John Kasich got 10. Rand Paul at 22. Marco Rubio at 88. Rick Santorum did not receive any. Donald Trump at 37.
Sorry, Kevin, that was terribly rude of us, but we also wanted to have some of the flavor of the count from that Des Moines caucus location. Kevin Tibbles, go ahead from Indianola.
Well, they have just finished counting the votes here, Brian. This place was standing room only. It holds 400 people. People were lined up around the walls. There were a lot of people that brought their children here. And as you may or may not have heard me say as that vote counting was going on, a lot of spouses, men and women, were suggesting that they had to drag along their spousal unit here because people here seem to find this particular caucus perhaps more important than those in the past. As I've been listening to your programming there, we've been hearing a lot of talk about Marco Rubio. Well, out of the 2 precincts that caucused here in this church this evening, one of them, Marco Rubio, literally walked away with, almost doubling the votes of Donald Trump and Ted Cruz. The first precinct, Ted Cruz won that by a more narrow margin. So in listening to what you folks have been talking about, it seems to have been reflected in Indianola, some 20 minutes south of Des Moines. People are now making their way out. A very civil evening. A lot of people got up and sort of barnstormed the crowd, talking about the candidate that they wanted other people to support. It was a real sort of grassroots evening, but a very disappointing one for many of the candidates. Marco Rubio seems to have been the real winner here in Indianola tonight, Brian.
Kevin Tibble in Indianola. Kevin, thank you. Let's go to Des Moines. Let's go back to Des Moines, where Chris Hayes is at that crowded caucus site, which has a bunch of precincts and both parties. Chris, where are you and what's happening?
All right, Rachel. So I am in an auditorium. That's the Sanders supporters right now. I'm in an auditorium. They were expecting about 250 people. They have 448. Wow. They just did the first count, and they had to put people on the stage. They did the first count. Viability number for O'Malley at 15% was 68. It's actually 67.2, but caucus rules are you round up, despite the fact that our caucus chair said the nuns taught me to round down. So it was 68, and they did not make it. So that small group of people on the stage are the 24 O'Malley supporters who are now deciding where to go. There were also 10 uncommitted. They are now going through the sorting process in this huge auditorium. At the first count, the Bernie Sanders supporters had about 50% of the folks here. We'll see if they add to their number. Now, this is a precinct that is fairly strong, I think, for Sanders in terms of the profile of the folks here. As we were sort of coming in, it seemed like he was going to be stronger here. He is stronger here so far, but it is a massive turnout. And the caucus chair has handled this very difficult spatial situation with tremendous aplomb throughout the evening. They've figured out all sorts of ways to count folks. No one can really move. As you can see, people are sort of pinned in on the sides. It's not like a room. It's not the field house that Jacob was in where people can move around very easily. This is actually the opposite of that. And it's taken some on-the-fly logistical improvisation from the very adept caucus chair to make this happen. And we are late now, but it's now looking like they're going to get towards a final count. You can see folks sort of breathing a sigh of relief at the end of what has been a pretty long process.
Chris Hayes, closest thing we have to a vertical caucus
Standing in the seating with that caucus.
High pitch. Okay, another break. We'll be back right after this. The staples of political coverage in this country, the shot of the candidate and their family watching returns in the hotel room. This is tape turnaround from a few moments ago. In his hotel room, Bernie Sanders watching the returns from the state he sometimes calls Iowa in his Brooklyn accent. So far for him, obviously, our boards have this race too close to call. Went from too early to call to now too close to call. We're nearing the halfway mark, though, in what passes for the Democrats' way of counting the returns tonight, 51-48.
Those small numbers below the percentages for each candidate are not vote totals. They're delegate equivalents, which is a whole different idea.
Don't even get us started.
But again, too close to call on the Democratic side and also on the Republican side. Ted Cruz and Donald Trump are vying for first. It is too close to call, according to NBC News. Marco Rubio currently in third. Now, that's the bottom line, as best as we can give it to you on both of these races right now. One source of information that we've got is entrance polling. And on the Democratic side, in terms of the entrance polling, there's some interesting perspective on President Obama. One of the things that's not a mirror image between the two parties is that there's a lot of range on the Republican side between in terms of how the Republican voters of Iowa feel about their candidates, whether or not they like them. There are a number of candidates on the Republican side who Iowa Republicans do not have a favorable opinion of. That's not true among Iowa Democrats. Iowa Democrats love their candidates, and they love President Obama. The favorable numbers for Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders are in the 80s. The favorable numbers for President Obama among Iowa Democrat is more like 90%. But look at this entrance polling from people who turned out on the Democratic side to caucus tonight in Iowa. People were asked about President Obama's policies. Would you like to see them continue? A big majority of people going to the Democratic caucuses in Iowa tonight, 56%, said they want to see President Obama's policies continue. Nearly a third of people going out tonight to the Democratic caucuses in Iowa say they want President Obama's policies to be continued in a more liberal direction. Only 7% say they want President Obama's policies to go in a less liberal direction in terms of which way the country goes post-Obama. So that's a good snapshot of what kind of Democratic electorate turned out tonight. They like President Obama broadly, but if you have to ask him to veer one direction from his policies, they want it to go more left. And not more right.
When last we left Jacob Silberoff, he was in some physical danger of being trampled by the Bernie Sanders forces in the middle of the field house. Let's go back down to the floor of the field house. What movement can you report, Jacob?
Okay, so we have some numbers. These are not delegate numbers or reportable numbers, but there was some danger of the Hillary Clinton campaign not being viable because you need to have 15% of the overall total to be viable here. The Hillary campaign had 89 supporters out of 495. They expected in the 200 range people to be here. So Hillary is safe. She's viable for now. And now they're trying to get every last voter in order to bump up the delegate count that she'll be walking out of here with. The Bernie campaign obviously is also viable. Right now, we are seeing maybe a little democracy in action. See if we can peek into this recruiting session that's going on right now.
That's exactly what Bernie's going to do. Bernie is trying to lower, or is trying to equal them so that the upper class are not paying the same amount of taxes as the middle and lower. Bernie is trying to equal the playing fields.
So
do you understand?
I'd still be like paying the same amount as taxes, whereas like people who make more income than me would be paying even more taxes because they can afford it.
Right, they're going to be, okay, so like the percentage that you pay is going to be equal no matter how much income you have.
Okay.
And that is what Bernie's stance is. He's trying to level it.
Okay, Rachel, Brian, this is how it goes. This is how it goes down here at the Iowa caucus. Oh, we're gonna go back and keep listening. Hold on.
Single person. It's large corporations that he wants to make sure that they're paying their fair share of taxes and that they're not putting jobs overseas. He wants to bring jobs back into America.
Okay, the TPP.
I have a question because
okay, go ahead.
Answered. What is your rebuttal about the military? How he hasn't talked to correspondents?
Yeah.
See, that's just kind of a thing with, in general, like their commander-in-chief. They know their political backgrounds. No matter if they meet with foreign correspondents, I mean, I'm not going to say that's not important because it is completely important. I'm like your boyfriend's military. I know Christian. It comes with the job. Just because you meet with them doesn't mean you're any better than anyone else.
Are you concerned about your boyfriend who's in the military?
Yes.
Bernie is for the VA. He cares about veterans' rights. He cares about taking care of them. He doesn't want to ship them overseas and then bring them back when they're not taken care of.
What I want to know is how, because I get VA. I am VA. I am a vet. My mom's a vet. how is he going to fix it? Because I can tell you right now that the VA is more screwed up than it has been in a while. The fact that I haven't gotten benefits in 3 months because the VA is so fucked up really makes me concerned. So how is Bernie going to fix it?
Bernie's whole thing is that if you can't
win or lose me on this.
If you can't, Bernie's whole idea on this is that if
you know, when you listen into caucuses, you take the good with the bad.
Sorry about that.
People often speak the way they do out on the street, and we apologize. I know Jacob apologizes. We all join him in apologizing for a bit of French that snuck in to our English language translation there. But Jacob, example well taken. Very young veteran of our country, a very heated microcosm conversation, and an interesting subplot there. I presume what they were talking about is President Obama's decision to host foreign correspondents, American-based foreign correspondents at the White House, which has happened at least once in his presidency. I'm imagining that's what they were talking about there.
Yeah, that's right, Brian. And again, apologies from us here in the field house as well. Obviously, as I said, this is what democracy looks like. It ain't pretty, and people get very heated out here. We're not walking in. We're not putting ballots in the ballot box. These are people pouring out their hearts, pouring out their souls, and a little bit of foul language as well, to decide who the next leader of the free world is going to be. You hear from military veterans here. You hear from people that are looking for jobs, paychecks, health care. This is quite literally, in certain situations, life or death stuff, and this is no joke.
Jacob, can I just ask you what we were just overhearing there? And I've never seen you blush before, so I know that your apology is genuine because you went bright red as soon as that happened. But in terms of what we were watching there in that heated conversation, that was obviously Bernie supporters trying to persuade. Were those uncommitted, unaligned voters, or were those Martin O'Malley supporters? Who were they trying to persuade to join Bernie's camp?
Yeah, that's right. So those are, I would assume that those are uncommitted voters. They very well could have been also Martin O'Malley voters that went into the uncommitted category because, as we were talking about earlier, Martin O'Malley was not viable. He didn't get 15% of supporters, 72.5 people in his corner over there. And so that's what we were seeing. I just want to pan around again to the Bernie Sanders group, who are now just sort of cooling their heels, waiting to find out ultimately how many delegates Bernie Sanders is going to walk out of here with, because they are guaranteed, obviously, a sizable portion of the delegates at this location.
All right, Jacob, we will come back to you. We're going to check in with our own Casey Hunt, who is over at Sanders headquarters. And Casey, as an old Associated Press veteran yourself, I know you have some reporting on what they're saying inside Sanders headquarters.
Brian, good evening. Well, we just showed you that video of Senator Sanders pacing in his hotel room. It's a suite that they've got upstairs at this Holiday Inn where they're waiting and watching the returns. And if you've ever covered Bernie Sanders before, watched him a little bit, I covered him some in the Senate, you'll know that he has a famous lack of patience. You remember back to his presidential announcement, it actually only lasted 10 minutes, and it was marked by him saying, hey, you know, we've got other important things to do. We got to get back to the Senate. And, you know, we can still see that today. He's clearly at a point where he's loving this. He's come so far at this point. If you remember back to I went and watched what some of the pundits had to say when he first announced. They called him crazy. People called him a loon. I asked Sanders about that, those specific terms, a day or so ago, and he said, you know what? I said at the time, don't underestimate me. And I'll say that again, don't underestimate me now. And talking to Sanders' aides who are in the room with him and who are on the phone with the war room that they have down the street at headquarters, they have a team of people. They've built their own app so that they can be in touch directly with precinct captains and get a chance to know independently themselves what they're seeing. And those early reports reflect what we've seen across the board, what Jacob and others are seeing at these caucuses. And that is just enormous turnout, people running out of registration forms, one caucus having to be pushed into a parking lot. One example that an aide used with me is a caucus site in Sioux City, which I'm sure you're familiar with the geography of Iowa. Iowa that's out in western Iowa, which for Republicans is a very conservative area, and on the Democratic side would traditionally be considered a place where Hillary Clinton might do well. The Sanders team has heard from some of their captains out there that the people who are showing up and tearing out those registration forms, leaving them with none left to hand out, are all there for Bernie Sanders. That's, of course, according to the precinct captains that are there working for Bernie and in touch with the campaign back here in Des Moines.
I knew you would have reporting from inside the campaign. Casey Hunt, who was briefly 50 feet tall in the giant screen behind her there in the ballroom. Casey, thanks. Let's run our boards again, take a look at the arithmetic as we know it and as we have it. Important phrase on the upper left, too close to call. Important number after that. 53%, though this does not refer to any kind of raw vote. 51-48 in the context of too close to call. Over to the Republican side. Again, we're showing the boards of the top three. That is not to mean that Rubio is in leader contention. We're nearing the halfway point. Too close to call. A race for first between Cruz and Trump, 29-26. Difference of about $2 grand in the raw, but it's early, and you see the rest of the field. Again, it's early, but Carson, Paul, Bush, Fiorina, Huckabee, Kasich, Christie, and Santorum. There's all of the Republican field. 50% of the raw vote in. These are how the percentages shake out. To Chris Matthews at our election headquarters in Des Moines. Chris?
Thank you, Brian. I've Robert Costa here, the top reporter for the Washington Post, trying to figure out what the headline is tonight. And I look at a couple things we know already. 97% rejection of the Bush family. Dramatic. I mean, they spent, what, $15 million out here? That's already in the news. That's done.
Not surprising. The Bush campaign has put all of its chips on New Hampshire. That's where his last play is right now.
Let me ask you about this three-way. It's a two-way, looking at the raw numbers now, a two-way between Cruz and Trump. And with Rubio, I have the sense that the Rubio spin's going to hit us around 11 o'clock or midnight. They're going to have a dramatic statement from him, very gushing, claiming victory. Why do I know that's coming? He will claim victory in third place.
I mean, when you talk to Rubio allies tonight, as I have for the last 30 minutes, they're going to cast this as a victory for the senator, someone who's going to go barreling into New Hampshire as the establishment favorite. He didn't need a win here tonight. He needed momentum. They feel he got it.
And will this be very much, I've seen great spins before. Mondale back in '84 when he won 1 out of 9 contests on one night, and the next morning Today's Show congratulated him for winning, thanks to Bob Beckles' good work then. I watched Bill Clinton come in 8 points behind Tsongas in New Hampshire, claim victory, call himself the comeback kid. How much media manipulation are we going to see tonight from the candidates, where they simply spin reality to their favor?
Well, I'm not so sure it's the media manipulation. It's the Republican establishment needs a horse. They want to stay in this race. They say Cruz and Trump dominating
Even though he wasn't in the running for victory out here.
Well, Rubio really never had a strong ground game here. He came to the suburbs. He came to the urban areas. What I'm watching as well with the high turnout, the Cruz organization is for real. That evangelical network, religious conservatives, they came out tonight for Ted Cruz. He is as competitive as ever because of that ground operation.
When we get to midnight, we get to final returns. If we do get something conclusive by midnight East Coast time, do you think there's any way that Trump can accept anything but defeat if he loses? Is it a sheer loss, or he can say, I've always been more popular in New Hampshire, blah, blah, blah. This was an evangelical state. The guy cheated. He put out that mailer the last couple days. I didn't really lose here. Is that possible?
It's possible because Trump has never really spun this as a favorable state. It's a state he wanted to win, but it wasn't home turf. He always wanted to go into New Hampshire and South Carolina. If he doesn't win tonight, what did he get out of Iowa? He bruised Cruz, brought up the Canadian birth. He brings up the nasty reputation in the Senate. Those are his words.
Can Cruz escape defeat out here if he loses? Can he say it wasn't a defeat?
If it's tight, yes, he can. The Cruz campaign is built for a national campaign. They're strong in South Carolina. They have a whole apparatus in the South. This is going to be a long race. If it's tight between Trump and Cruz tonight, I expect a protracted primary battle.
Thank you. By the way, Brian, I have to tell you and Rachel, I have never seen better photography and covering of a caucus night like tonight. The pictures coming out of the field house at the University of Iowa, the pictures of the hotel room of Bernie Sanders is Time Magazine, is the kind of picture you usually get a week later. And here we are getting it the night of the event. It's fabulous to watch that. That picture of him pensively looking at, he's probably watching us, pensively looking at the TV screen is history. There it is. It's a great picture. I've grown up with, as you guys have done, grown up with those pictures of people watching that and see how they're doing. It is except for that bit of cinema verite a few minutes ago, it's been absolutely perfect.
Audio verite. Yeah, part of that, Chris, is miniaturization. I mean, we can all shoot that quality picture on our devices, and we see in the background how small cameras have gotten, to the great consternation of the men and women who make up our camera crew population around the world. Let's fit in another break, because when we come back, we're going to go live to Trump headquarters, where a crowd is gathering in Des Moines.